There's a moment that changes everything. Not when you realize you're done, but when he realizes you're no longer an option. That's when it hits him hard. Not when you cried, not when you asked for more, but when your silence replaced your effort, when your energy disappeared, when he reached for you and you were no longer there. Because men often don't feel the weight of losing you when you walk away. They feel it when your emotional generosity stops feeding their comfort. That's when he begins to regret not just what he lost, but how he never appreciated it when he had it. And if he only starts chasing when you're gone, ask yourself, is that really love? Or just his ego reacting to the loss of control? Don't confuse his panic with change. Don't mistake his craving for growth. If it takes your absence for him to see your worth, he never really saw you to begin with. What hits hardest isn't your goodbye. It's the moment he realizes you're not an option anymore and you're not coming back. Ready to know what happens when you finally choose yourself? Let's talk about it. There's a moment, quiet, subtle, almost unnoticeable to the outside world, when everything changes. You don't scream, you don't send a dramatic text, you don't announce anything. But inside you, something clicks. And in that moment, the energy between you and him completely shifts. It's not that you've stopped caring entirely. It's that you finally decided to care more about yourself than about trying to be chosen by someone who couldn't see your value when you were right in front of him. It's wild how we're taught that power comes from being louder, from asserting our worth, from demanding someone recognize what they're about to lose. But the truth is, the most powerful moment in any dynamic is the one where you stop trying, not out of bitterness, not as a performance, but because you've reached that sacred point of exhaustion where the idea of putting in one more ounce of energy into someone who's not meeting you halfway just feels beneath you. And that shift, that's the moment he feels it. You're still responding, maybe even still being polite, but the warmth is gone. The sparkle he used to rely on when you picked up his call or showed up for him. It's just not there anymore. You didn't plan it, you didn't rehearse it, it's just absent. And that absence, it hits like a freight train. See, when someone gets used to you always being available, emotionally, mentally, even physically, they stop appreciating it. They start believing it's their right that you'll always be around, that no matter how inconsistently they show up, you'll be right there, waiting for them to figure it out. But when your energy changes, when you finally stop giving from that bottomless well of love and understanding, they don't just feel the loss of you, they feel the loss of the version of themselves that only existed when they had access to your affection. You don't need to block him. You don't need to yell or explain. In fact, the most profound shifts come from doing less, not more. Because people don't respond to what you say, they respond to how you feel. And when you feel done, when you feel detached, when you've genuinely let go, not as a strategy, not as reverse psychology, but as a truth you've finally accepted, your energy becomes undeniable. And the man who once overlooked you suddenly starts to question everything. Wait, why doesn't she seem bothered anymore? Why isn't she texting back the way she used to? Why do her responses feel so different? He might not articulate it, but he feels it. The emotional grip he had on you, even if he never meant to exploit it, is gone. And that confuses him. It rattles his sense of control. It forces him to confront something he's been avoiding, that your presence wasn't a guarantee, that your love wasn't on autopilot, that you were choosing him every day, and now you're simply not. And here's the most fascinating part. Sometimes you haven't even physically left. You're still there, still visible, still polite, but your heart isn't invested anymore. And people can feel that. They may not be able to explain it, but something feels different in the way you say hello, in the way you laugh, in the way you look at them. That energy you once poured so freely into them has been reclaimed. And that reclamation isn't just powerful, it's magnetic. You start focusing on yourself again, on your growth, on your peace, on your future. And without even realizing it, you stop being an option. Because you finally made the choice that he wouldn't make for you to walk away from a dynamic where you were giving more than you were receiving. And the irony is, that's often when he starts to reach out, when he begins to panic, when he suddenly has clarity. But that clarity isn't always about love. Sometimes it's just the sting of losing something he thought he could always come back to. And you have to ask yourself, do I want to be with someone who only noticed my value when I stopped offering it? Because the truth is, when a man finally realizes you're no longer an option, it's not just your absence he feels, it's the weight of his own inaction, the calls he didn't make, the vulnerability he avoided, the effort he withheld, and now he has to live with the echo of what could have been. So don't underestimate the power of that internal shift. You don't need to shout it. You just need to feel it deep in your bones and let your actions reflect it. Because when your energy truly changes, everything else does too. And trust me, he'll feel it, whether he ever admits it or not. Most people think that when you walk away, the other person instantly feels the loss, that they'll suddenly realize what they've done, chase you down the street and beg for another chance. But that's not usually how it works. The truth is, most men don't feel the impact the moment you leave. They feel it when the benefits of having you in their life stop, when the quiet, often unspoken gifts you gave, your patience, your emotional support, your availability, your loyalty, suddenly aren't there anymore. It's easy to underestimate just how much you were giving when you were in it. You might not have been the loudest, most demanding person in the room. You might not have made a fuss, but you were steady. You were present. You checked in. You remembered the little things. You gave advice when he was lost. You made his life feel more stable, more understood. Maybe you were the first to send the good luck text before his big meeting. Maybe you were the one person who truly believed in him when he wasn't even believing in himself. And all of that consistent, genuine presence becomes so normal, so ingrained, that he stops noticing until it's gone. That's the thing. The real weight of your presence is often only recognized through the hollow space your absence creates. At first, he might even enjoy the freedom. He might think, good, no more pressure. He interpret your silence as a bluff. But days go by, then weeks, and slowly a certain kind of loneliness sets in. Not the kind solved by another text or a night out, but a specific emptiness where you used to be. He realizes no one checks in like you did. No one calms his storms quite the way you did. No one understands the tiny, quirky things about him the way you did. It's in that slow, creeping awareness that regret starts to take hold, not because you begged him to see your value, but because you stopped showing up for a man who didn't meet you where you were. He begins to feel the silence, not as punishment, but as the consequence of being on the receiving end of someone's limit finally being reached. And the pain of that hits different, because he knows deep down it wasn't sudden, it was gradual. You gave chance after chance, you waited, you tried, and now that it's done, it's not dramatic, it's final. And there's no bigger gut punch than realizing someone gave you so many opportunities to step up, and you didn't take any of them. That's when the what ifs start to echo. What if I'd just done things differently? What if I had taken her more seriously? What if I hadn't been so sure she'd always be there? These questions don't come from missing a casual fling. They come from losing someone real, someone who cared, someone who brought peace and meaning into their life. The man who once felt so sure you'd always be an option now wrestles with the fact that you're not even looking back. You see, men often underestimate the emotional foundation women lay in a relationship. The quiet work, the invisible labor, the way you adapt, support, and nurture. And when you walk away, they don't immediately lose a person. They lose a structure, a rhythm, a refuge. And rebuilding that takes more than just missing you. It takes confronting the fact that their choices, whether it was neglect, indifference, or simply not stepping up, are what caused it all to crumble. And here's what's important. This isn't about revenge. This isn't about making someone suffer. You didn't walk away to punish. You walked away to protect yourself, your time, your peace. And as much as he may want to believe this is temporary, a phase, or something he can undo with a few words, what he's really coming to terms with is that you've started showing up for yourself the way you used to show up for him. And that's the shift he feels most. When a man realizes you're no longer an option, it doesn't hit like a thunderbolt. It hits like a slow storm. And by the time it lands, you're already gone. Already building a life where you are the priority, not the afterthought. And that realization, that's the moment he understands the difference between losing someone and truly being left behind. Because once a woman sees her own worth, she stops asking someone else to. When you were showing up consistently, being there, listening, supporting, checking in, caring, without asking for much in return, you may have wondered if he truly saw you. You might have questioned if he understood what he had. And the hardest part is he probably didn't. Not fully. Not while you were there. See, when someone becomes used to your presence, your attention, your energy, they don't always pause to examine its value. It just becomes part of the background, expected, assumed, like air, essential but unnoticed until it's gone. What's painful is when you're still there, giving everything, hoping he'll notice, hoping he'll wake up. But it often doesn't work that way, because familiarity breeds a kind of blind. The more available you are, the easier it is to take you for granted. That's not a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of how most people operate when they haven't done the work to be intentional in their relationships. When you're emotionally generous, thoughtful, forgiving, even when your needs go unmet, someone who isn't fully conscious of your value might see your consistency as something that'll never leave. They assume you'll stay. They believe they have time. But then something changes. Maybe it's slow, like you stop texting first. You stop sharing your day. You stop filling the silence. Or maybe it's fast. You walk away with quiet conviction. No anger, just clarity. And that's when it begins to hit. Not because of a big fight. Not because you finally begged him to love you right. It hits because your energy is gone. Your presence, that thing he thought would always be there, is no longer accessible. You're not cold. You're not cruel. You're just done. And that absence speaks in a language louder than any argument or explanation ever could. There's something deeply unsettling for someone when they realize they're no longer occupying space in your life, that they're no longer on your mind, that they're not in the loop of your thoughts, your texts, your world. And it often stings more because it wasn't a dramatic exit. It was just a decision you made quietly and firmly. You didn't punish. You didn't plead. You just stopped offering what they stopped appreciating. This is when regret begins to seep in. When he starts replaying the moments you reached out first, the times you showed up when he barely did, the way you cared, even when you felt unseen. Suddenly those things aren't just nice gestures, they become painful reminders of what he no longer has access to. And the hardest truth for him to face is this: you were never asking for too much. You were just asking the wrong person, or more accurately, the right person, who wasn't ready to be right for you. What catches most men off guard is how quickly they go from she's always there to she's nowhere. And that shift isn't just physical, it's emotional. It's spiritual. It's the absence of your heart that creates the biggest void. He might try to reach out, poke at the connection, see if there's still a little spark left. But you're different now, not because you hate him, but because you finally love yourself more than the version of you who kept waiting around, hoping he'd change. And here's the most ironic part. It's often in your absence that he begins to fully see you. Not the image he had of you, not the convenient, always available version, but the real you, the one with standards, the one with strength, the one with a deeply giving heart that doesn't hand itself out to anyone who only shows up halfway. That's when the gravity of what he lost starts to pull at him, not because you left to make him chase you, but because you left to find your peace. Your silence becomes sacred. Your distance becomes powerful, not out of revenge, but out of reverence for yourself. And if he comes back, it's not always because he's changed. Sometimes it's just because he finally sees what he had. And while that might feel validating for a moment, it's important to remember this. Appreciation that only arrives in your absence isn't the kind you build a future on. You don't need someone who only wakes up when you're gone. You deserve someone who values you while you're still there, who doesn't need to lose you to realize how lucky they are to have you. So if you're in that space, the one where you're wondering if he'll ever realize what he lost, know this: your absence will speak for you in ways your words never could. Let it. Let it echo. Let it remind him that you were never an option. You were the opportunity he didn't take. Regret is such a powerful emotion. And ironically, it's often not felt when someone has everything. They feel it when they realize they've lost it. That's when it hits. That's when clarity strikes. And for many men, they don't feel the full weight of their actions, or more accurately, their inactions, until the woman they thought would always be there no longer is. Here's what happens. When someone is used to having you around, when they get used to your emotional generosity, to your constant availability, to your patience, your understanding, your willingness to hold space for their confusion or distance or indecision, they stop seeing it as a gift. They start treating it like a given. And when something becomes a given, it becomes background noise. It becomes something they assume will just always be there, waiting. But when that woman, you start to shift, when you start reclaiming your peace, your time, your dignity, there's often no big dramatic moment. There's just a subtle yet seismic change. You stop checking in, you stop making excuses for him, you stop being emotionally available for someone who's only ever half there. You stop feeding the dynamic. And at first, he may not even notice. He might think you're just a little distant. Maybe you're busy, maybe you're trying to make a point, and you'll bounce back. That's what he tells himself. He doesn't realize something far more permanent has started. And then time passes. He sends that message, and you don't respond the way you used to. He throws out a vague, "Hey, been thinking about you." And instead of melting, instead of dropping everything, instead of reopening that part of you that used to wait for breadcrumbs, you respond with polite indifference or not at all. That's the moment. That's when it starts to hit. The moment he realizes that the woman who once made him feel like the center of her world no longer orbits him. And in that moment, the story he's been telling himself about you starts to unravel. The story where you'd always be there, where you'd always forgive, where he could take his time figuring things out while you stayed emotionally loyal. Well, that story dies, and now he's left with the truth. You were never going to wait forever. That's when regret creeps in. And it's not just about missing you. It's about the mirror that your absence holds up to him. He starts remembering the ways you showed up, the little things you did, the way you cared, not because you had to, but because it was who you are. He starts recalling those conversations where you were vulnerable, honest, hopeful, where you made space for something real, even when he wasn't ready to meet you there. And here's the thing, regret is cruel because it usually doesn't arrive with a second chance. It arrives when the door has already closed, when the silence is no longer a tactic, but a reality, when your attention is no longer his to take for granted. That's when it lands heavy. He doesn't just regret losing you, he regrets the version of himself that couldn't appreciate you, that couldn't choose you, that thought someone like you would stick around while he stayed half in, half out. He regrets not growing sooner, not showing up sooner, not realizing what was in front of him until it was behind him. And make no mistake, that regret doesn't fade quickly, because every new connection he tries to build, every new woman he meets gets measured, consciously or not, against you, against what he had and lost. And most of them won't measure up, not because they're not good people, but because he remembers what it felt like to be in the presence of someone who gave fully, authentically, and fearlessly, someone who made love feel like a safe place, not a battlefield. The irony is some people only learn the lesson once it's too late to apply it to the person who taught it. And you were that teacher, not through preaching or trying to convince him of your worth, but by walking away when it was clear he couldn't see it for himself. So if you ever wonder whether he'll regret it, know this. People don't regret losing someone they didn't value. They regret losing someone they did value but were too distracted, too selfish, or too emotionally unavailable to value properly in the moment. They regret the cost of their own avoidance. And when the moment of clarity comes, it doesn't come gently. It hits hard. And the only reason it hits hard is because you meant something, because you were real, because your love wasn't ordinary. And it knows he won't find it again. When you pull away from someone, especially someone you've had feelings for, it's easy to feel like you're doing something wrong, like you're being cold, like you're playing a game. And that's exactly where a lot of people get stuck, in the guilt of not showing up the way you used to, the guilt of not texting back immediately, of not initiating plans, of not bending over backwards to keep the connection alive. But here's the truth. Pulling away isn't a game. It's not manipulation. It's not about trying to make someone miss you or proving a point. It's a form of self-respect. When you've given someone consistent effort, attention, affection, when you've been emotionally available and genuinely present, and that energy hasn't been reciprocated, pulling away becomes necessary. Not to punish them, but to protect you. Because there comes a moment where your soul gets tired of reaching out with no one reaching back. There's a moment when you realize that continuing to show up at full capacity in a relationship where the other person is only halfway in is not noble, it's self-abandonment. And the truth is, when someone's used to you being the one who keeps the connection alive, who always forgives first, who always texts first, who always tries to talk things through, the moment you stop doing that, they notice. The moment you go quiet, they feel it, because that's when it hits them. They were never matching your energy. They were relying on it. But this moment, this pulling away, can be so emotionally conflict, especially when you still care. You're not walking away with anger. You're not walking away with bitterness. You're walking away because staying is now costing you your peace. And that's something you can't keep paying for. Not with your time, not with your self-worth, and certainly not with your heart. People confuse pulling back with trying to make someone chase. That's not what this is about. This isn't about sitting there, hoping they realize what they've lost and come running back with flowers and some grand apology. No. This is about recognizing that the connection isn't nourishing anymore, that it's one-sided, that it's draining, and choosing to step away, not because you want them to come after you, but because you want to come back to yourself. There's a very different energy between I'm doing this so you'll miss me, and I'm doing this because I finally miss me. That second one, that's real. That's powerful. That's when you start reclaiming your emotional dignity. And the irony is, it's often in that moment when you truly detach that they suddenly snap into realization. That's when they wake up and say, wait, where did she go? Why does this feel different? And it feels different because it is. You've stopped feeding the connection. You've stopped being emotionally available in a way that kept everything together. You've stopped offering the kind of unconditional care that made them feel secure, even when they weren't giving it back. And now there's a void, a silence, a space where your energy used to be. And that space, that absence, that's what hits the hardest. Because it's not about the texts or the calls or the plans anymore. It's about the feeling of no longer being chosen by someone who used to choose you every day, even when they weren't choosing you back. But here's the real turning point. Even when they come back, even when they show up suddenly, acting like they've changed or that they've realized something important, you're not the same person who's waiting for that moment. You've evolved, because pulling away wasn't just an action, it was a decision. A decision to no longer settle for crumbs when you know you deserve the whole damn cake. A decision to no longer stay emotionally loyal to someone who wasn't emotionally committed to you. That decision changes everything because it shows you what you're really made of. It reminds you that love isn't supposed to feel like convincing. It's supposed to feel like reciprocity. And when you've tasted the peace that comes from no longer overgiving, no longer over-explaining, no longer bending just to keep the other person comfortable, that peace becomes priceless. You start to understand that not everyone is meant to hold your heart, that just because you felt something real doesn't mean they were ready for it. And that's okay, because you're no longer investing based on potential. You're investing based on presence, on who shows up for you, not just when you walk away, but while you're still there. And when someone only realizes your value in your absence, you begin to question whether they truly ever saw you or just liked the convenience of your presence. That question alone is enough to keep you walking towards something healthier. Because now you know stepping back wasn't weakness. It was strength. It was clarity. It was love, not for them, but for yourself. And in the end, when you choose self-respect over silent suffering, that's when everything shifts. We often find ourselves in this loop, giving chance after chance, holding on to the idea that maybe he just needs more time. Maybe he's scared. Maybe he doesn't know how to express what he feels. So we stay. We make excuses. We give patience, understanding, softness. We wait for him to rise into the relationship, to meet us there, to finally choose us fully. And then one day, something shifts. Not because he suddenly changed, but because you finally did. You start to feel tired, not just physically, but emotionally. Drained from carrying the weight of a connection that always felt one-sided. From being the one to initiate, to check in, to make plans, to explain how you feel while he gives vague answers and disappearing acts. You reach a moment where your spirit just says enough. And it's not a dramatic exit. It's not slamming doors or sending long, emotional messages. It's quiet. It's a reclaiming. It's you choosing peace over potential. And that's when it hits him. Because he wasn't listening when you spoke. He didn't move when you begged. He didn't change when you gave him time, but your absence, that he can't ignore. Suddenly, your silence is louder than all the words you ever said. Your lack of availability becomes the mirror he didn't want to look into. Because it's not just that you're gone, it's that you're not waiting anymore. Now he's texting, now he's calling, now he's bringing up memories, saying he misses you, asking if you can talk. But here's where you need to see clearly. If he only acts when you're gone, that's your answer. When someone genuinely values you, They don't wait until they've lost you to show up. They act when it matters while they still have you. They don't gamble with your heart, assuming they can win you back if things go too far. The man who only chases once he feels the sting of your absence isn't waking up to love. He's reacting to loss. And that's a very different thing. You see, sometimes it's not about missing you. It's about missing the version of himself he got to be when you were around. It's the comfort, the attention, the validation, maybe even the ego stroke, the idea that someone so incredible wanted him. That felt good. And when you pull away, that feeling disappears and he scrambles to get it back. But that doesn't mean he's ready to give what he never gave. It doesn't mean he's changed. It just means he's uncomfortable now. And here's what makes it tricky. When he reaches out in that space, it often sounds like real emotion. It looks like effort. And because you loved him, because a part of you still hopes it might be different, it's tempting to believe it's real, to believe that this time it's coming from the right place. But don't confuse a man missing your presence with a man ready for your future. The regret he's feeling isn't necessarily about losing the relationship. It's about losing access. This is why so many people find themselves back in the same cycle. They return to someone who only realizes their value in retrospect, only to watch that moment of intensity fade as quickly as it came, because it was never rooted in growth. It was rooted in reaction. And relationships built on reaction don't last. They burn bright and then burn out, because they're not founded on real commitment, but on fear of loss. So you have to ask yourself, if the only time he fights for you is when he's already lost you, is that really love? Or is it possession? Is it the kind of love that honors you in the everyday, when it's not convenient, when it's not dramatic, or is it just a spike of emotion, brought on by the realization that he no longer has control? You deserve more than to be someone's wake-up call. You deserve more than to be a lesson someone learns too late. Love doesn't show up when it's too late. Love shows up before it needs to. It shows up when things are hard. It shows up consistently. It shows up without needing the threat of your absence to motivate it. So when he reaches out after you've walked away, pause. Not because you're punishing him, but because you're protecting yourself. Ask yourself whether what he's offering now is rooted in true growth or just discomfort, whether he's truly changed or just scared of losing the benefit of your presence. The truth is, if someone only realizes what you're worth once you stop making yourself available, then they never truly saw you to begin with. They saw what you gave, they saw what they got, but they didn't see you, not fully, not in the way someone who's ready to love you should. And that realization, as painful as it is also powerful, because it gives you permission to finally stop fighting for someone who was never really fighting for you. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away, not to teach them a lesson, but to remind yourself you were never meant to beg for what should have been freely given. You said, write a hook of 200 words on above-mentioned tittle. Include all keynotes, make it curious, attractive, and hooked the audience emotionally and psychologically. ChatGPT said, there's a moment that changes everything. Not when you realize you're done, but when he realizes you're no longer an option. That's when it hits him hard. Not when you cried, not when you asked for more, but when your silence replaced your effort, when your energy disappeared, when he reached for you and you were no longer there. Because men often don't feel the weight of losing you when you walk away. They feel it when your emotional generosity stops feeding their comfort. That's when he begins to regret not just what he lost, but how he never appreciated it when he had it. And if he only starts chasing when you're gone, ask yourself, is that really love or just his ego reacting to the loss of control? Don't confuse his panic with change. Don't mistake his craving for growth if it takes your absence for him to see your worth. He never really saw you to begin with. What hits hardest isn't your goodbye, it's the moment he realizes you're not an option anymore and you're not coming back. Ready to know what happens when you finally choose yourself? Let's talk about it.